Welcome, friends, on behalf of Crystal Clarity Publishers and Ananda Sangha Worldwide as part of our author interviews. Today we have the great pleasure and joy to have Nitai Deranja. Nitai was the founding director of the first Living Wisdom School in 1972 at Ananda Village. And since then, Nitai has overseen the development of a number of education for life schools in California, Oregon, Washington, in Slovenia, Italy, throughout Europe. He's presently teaches at the Ananda College of Living Wisdom, and he is also one of the authors of For Goodness Sake, How to Help Teenagers Learn Positive Values Through Experiential Activities. He's also the co-author with Joseph Cornell of Journey to the Heart of Nature. So it's a great privilege to have you, Nitai. Welcome.
Great. Nice to be here, Narayan.
So, Nitai, I wanted to start our discussion by, I know that you've been inspired by Autobiography of a Yogi, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit of your story of how Yogananda and the autobiography inspired you, and perhaps how that led you to this journey to the mission of sharing education for life.
I'd be happy to. So this is going quite a ways back. I think I was 23 at the time, so over half a century ago. I was on my own, quest for finding some way to make sense of life, which up to that point had not made a lot of sense to me. And I ended up with the book, Autobiography of a Yogi. And that was definitely the turning point, the crux of from wondering what in the world life was about, why we were here, and just kind of floundering from thing to thing. And reading that book just turned the corner. All of a sudden, I felt there is a way to make sense of life and to move forward. And so at that point now, it was all directed. It was not, the floundering part was over. Now it was just a matter of doing the homework to sit down and, like I need to learn how to meditate. But in addition to a kind of a full life focus for me, when I was reading that book, I found my attention just tweaked on the chapter about starting a school in Ranchi. And I remember there was one line there, because I just went back over it over Christmas. It was called "The Need to Bring Moral and Spiritual Principles into Education." It's something he talked about. And it just kind of woke something up inside of me. And so when almost immediately, I started looking around for ways to connect with kids. And so I volunteered to be a playground supervisor at a local school right away. And then just kind of started percolating in me this whole idea that, wow, you could do so much with children that I didn't get to experience. My upbringing was, it was pretty dogmatic. My parents were good, very good people, good Catholics, and they wanted to pass it on to me, and they enrolled me in a Catholic elementary school where I was there for 8 years. But nothing touched me. Nothing. It was just like it was just like a game. You were supposed to memorize these. I used to get A's in religion because I could memorize well. So I'd memorize the answers to the questions to the catechism. Who made us? God made us. Who is God? God is the supreme being, infinitely perfect, who made all things and keeps them in existence, and on and on. But I could have been memorizing chess moves, or and that made the same impact on me. So there was that missing depth. The dimension of depth wasn't there, and I take a responsibility for it. I think maybe the nuns were trying their best, but somehow it didn't work. So I came about 8 months after I'd read the Autobiography of Yogi. I found Ananda in Ananda Village. And I came up and to visit. This is the summer of 1970. And I wasn't quite ready to commit because I wasn't sure what I was committing to at that point. I was so brand new. I was still just barely learning how to meditate. And so at the end of the summer, I decided not to stay on. But I thought, well, what else would I want to do? And I thought, well, I'd like to follow up on this education thing. So I moved down to Sacramento and started teacher training, and spent the next 2 years taking classes and then actually interning with a public school near there. And I just found myself just like this, this is something that resonates for me, working with the kids. So at that point, then I finished that program, and then I was whether do I get a job in public school, or I'd been offered a job. Do I take the job, or do I move up to Ananda, not knowing exactly what would happen? But I had the inner guidance to no, go for it, go up there and see what's happening. So I moved up, and I'd been visiting off and on for those 2 years, and people knew me, and they knew I was studying to be a teacher. And the village was just getting off the ground, and there were a number of families there at that point, and children. And so when they found out that I was coming, I arrived on Friday. On Saturday morning, I was met by a delegation of people from the village who wanted to know if I could start the school on Monday. So it was a very quick turnover. And but it was just this incredible opportunity to try to tune in to Master. What did he mean by sharing moral and spiritual principles with children? And how would you do that? I knew pretty much how not to do it from my own upbringing.
Right.
But so it was all brand new. Swami was there, of course, most of the time at those years. And he gave me different little tidbits of advice. One of them, I went to him and I said, Swami, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I should get some training. I can go take Montessori training or Waldorf training, or maybe I go to Ranchi. And he looked at me and says, there's nothing to learn in Ranchi. And I verified that about 8 years later. Maybe I'll tell you that story too. But it was, he said, and then he told me, he says, you're going to have to get your answers from inside. You have to learn to develop your intuition, which was the perfect training for me personally. However, I always thought I might have slowed the whole process down by about a decade, because he could have told me what, he wrote the book. He wrote Education for Life. You asked me to bring a book. I'm sorry, but this is my book.
That's great.
I've gone through it thousands of times, and I've got everything underlined, and it's just. But he wrote this in 1983, 84, or something like that.
So you were there in 72.
72, yeah.
You had like a whole decade where you were having to go inside to actually discover it yourself.
Exactly. So it was a big process. A fun story I often share was it was a turning point for me. There was a couple of turning points. So in that first summer with the kids there was 6 kids from the ages of 4 to 8, and the youngest one was named Nicole. And so I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, and I thought, well, okay, at least I won't do any harm if I read them an inspiring story or tell them inspiring stories. So I thought, well, I've never read the Ramayana, but I have heard a lot about it. So we're gonna do the Ramayana together. This is one of the Indian epics, for those who don't know it.
Right.
And it's about Rama and Sita. And so I would cram the night before the next couple of chapters, which I'd never read before. And then I'd come in the next day and I'd tell them to the kids, and they loved it. Wow. It was the first thing that magnetized everybody. They wanted to be there. They wanted to know what's happened the next day to Rama and Sita. And
wow.
we're off and running. But there's a lot of big words in the book, and so I would stop, because these are little kids. And so this one day I said, Rama met his friend Hanuman, and Hanuman is this big monkey figure in the book. He said, Hanuman flew through the sky like a meteor. And I stopped and I said, well, meteor is a kind of a big word. Who knows what meteor means? And this one child raised their hand and says, I know. And I said, okay, what's a meteor? He says, it's somebody that eats hamburgers. So you have this picture of the monkey god Hanuman flying through the sky eating a Big Mac.
It sounds like very American.
And so I said to him, I said, no, I said, that's not actually it. No, I didn't laugh. I just, a meteor is something, and I explained what a meteor was. And so the next day I come in and said, well, Rama is going through the forest, and he comes up to a place where there's a man sitting under a tree in samadhi. And I said, okay, well, samadhi is a big word. Does anybody have any idea what samadhi is? And so Nicole, the 4-year-old, raises her hand. She says, I know. And I said, okay, I'm ready for another hamburger story. And she says, samadhi is when you're sitting there and you're really still, and somebody comes up and they say, Nicole, Nicole, and there's nobody there to answer. And it just floored me. I thought, my God, how could a 4-year-old have that kind of, even if somebody told her that, how could she remember it? But I don't think anybody told her. I think she just put it together in her own experience. And what it did for me is it flipped the script from me teaching them to me drawing stuff out of them that they already had inside of them. And it was a huge change in terms of me understanding education for life, because it all of a sudden it made it real for them, because they're talking about their own experiences, and all I'm doing is just clarifying things and drawing it out more, asking questions. But they're completely alive. And that's something that never happened to me when I was growing up. Nobody ever valued my own experience. Right. It was always, you listen to us and we're going to tell you what you should do. And so this continued up to this day. When I do teacher training programs online, it's one of the most important things I try to get across is you have to come from inside the child. You can't just push things from the outside. And you have to learn how to get in there where they trust you and they're willing to share these gems that they have inside of them.
Nitai, I've heard you share before about education for life, that you want the emphasis to be just that, student-centered versus curriculum-centered. Right. So were these experiences early on that they were, like you said, they helped you sort of flip the script and see it from that different paradigm?
Exactly. Yeah. It just, because children especially, adults too, aren't that good listeners just to listen to somebody else's experiences. If they can share their own experiences, their own thoughts, and then engage from that perspective, they're much more likely to actually change or move. And so it's been a major aspect of just how to work with the kids. I had one wonderful comment that I've shared again, and also there was a lady who was working with some of our teenagers, and she worked with a lot of teenagers, but she's working with some of ours. And she said to me once, she said, your students are different. And I said, why? What do you see? And she says, they know who they are. And I thought, wow, what a great compliment. Because again, it's that same thing of recognizing the child, letting the child feel recognized from inside, and then giving them the trust in themselves to work from that level, rather than, oh my gosh, what should I be doing? What's everybody else doing? How do I fit in? All these different things that people, not just teenagers, but a lot of adults get in. They're thinking from the outside in, because nobody ever took the time to empower them, in a sense, to tell them, no, you're worthwhile. Your experience is valid. Let's work with that. So it's a huge part. Yeah.
It sounds like I heard Swami Kriyananda say that a lot, and I never really understood it. Get from your center to someone else's center, relate from your center to their center. It sounds like that's what you were intuitively doing.
Exactly. And I get it. Like Swami knew all that stuff ahead of time, but he wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't just say, go to the child's center. He made me stumble around, and then of course he also trusted that since this was a dharmic work, that the insights I needed were going to come to me. The life itself was going to educate me. And he didn't have to worry about it. So
Now, I wonder, Nitai, in Education for Life, where Swami talks about the tools of maturity and the first 6 years of a child's life, getting acquainted with the body, and then so on from there. Was that something that you stumbled upon as well in those first 10 years, or did Swami help you clarify it when you read Education for Life?
oh, definitely, it was clarifying. There were things that I would pick up on, but they were just kind of little bits and pieces of information floating around in my head. And when he wrote the book, it was like all of a sudden, it just gave us a scaffolding to put all those pieces and make sense of how they all related to each other. Because you work with 3 and 4 year olds. I have a 3-year-old grandson right now, and the fact that he's in the body years is completely obvious. I mean, he wants to talk to me on the phone, on the video call, but he really doesn't have much to say. What he really wants to do is bounce. And he's just so into his body right now. He's learning how to, and the great insight I shared with him, I said, have you ever done a knee drop? And he got so excited about doing a knee drop because he'd never figured it out before. And when you bounce, and so yeah, the body part was so really obvious. The feeling part, you just see kids 6 to 12, especially the girls, they just start to get all these feelings come up about, when getting your feelings hurt, and oh, my best friend wasn't nice to me today, and just all this stuff starts to really come to the surface. And having a chance to just help them, what's the word? Just become aware of it rather than being enmeshed in it. Mm-hmm. Give them a little bit, like my first insight, and that was I forget why, but I just came in and I said, these kids were about 7, 8, 9 years old. And I said, let's just keep track for a week. I'm going to give them a little chart. And at lunchtime, I'm going to ask you, how did your morning go? Were you happy or were you sad? Mm. And then they're just learning to write. So we use colors. If you're happy, you color the space in blue. If you're sad, it was red. I think that was it. And so we just started doing that, and it was amazing. Just that simple little activity. All of a sudden they started talking about the morning, and then they started about got into the thing of, well, why was I happy? And then they were saying, okay, I was happy because my mom put a cookie in my lunch, or I was unhappy because Joey didn't play ball with me or something. But then we got, and there was very quickly on, they said, I'm not sure why I'm happy. So we had the session of happy without a reason. Mm. So you get happy with a reason, sad with a reason, or happy without a reason. And you talk about, well, what does that mean? Happy without a reason? Well, it means you're in touch with your soul joy. Wow. And they were experiencing it though. There wasn't something of, again, I wasn't teaching them, just like I would just, be working with it. And I think, my God, if I'd had a lesson like that when I was 8 years old, of my life, I would have saved, a whole lot of wear and tear in the next 2 decades.
Right.
So anyway, you just get so excited when you see that your little children can learn these profound tools. Education for life. Swami says, preparing them for the challenge. Well, how do you prepare for the challenge? Well, if you understand how life works a little bit, mm-hmm. You're way ahead of the curve in terms of working with that. We have, like right now, there was a little mistake in your introduction. You said I was working with the Ananda College, but right now I'm working with the Ananda Online High School. And so we have these students from around the world. We're really small. We're only a total of about 14 students right now. But they're from different cultures. And they, some of them are from Italy, some of them from Iran, some of them are from India. We have one girl from Uganda. And we were talking about, just, well, like we were talking about the social issues right now with COVID, and especially being online, and
Yeah.
they were telling me, he said, my online friends, they're my best friends. He said, I can talk to them about stuff that I can't talk to the people that live in my town, my friends in my town or stuff, because these kind of topics that come up naturally if you're looking for them, and if you're, as a teacher, you're just kind of waiting to see them pop up. They don't come up in most kids' worlds, especially, they never came up in my education. When I was going through public high school, you never talked about anything that had any depth at all. It was all very superficial stuff. Who's the cutest girl? Who won the football game? Who's got a fancy car? That was the 99.9% of the conversations. But now, just because of this being in this school setting, it comes up, and they see that other people their age are actually talking about these things, and then they start to talk, and it kind of just takes off. So it's a wonderful, wonderful way to serve.
It sounds like it's very enriching for those high school students because they have a peer group that is meaningful in a truly, with depth, like you were saying, that it's not just superficial, but they're getting to the heart of the matter, what life is about in this environment. So you were talking about the tools of maturity. So the first 6 years, if I heard you correctly, is the body, and then the feeling nature comes in around 6 or
Yeah, it comes to the surface. It's always there. All these things are always there, but it's just like what pops up to the surface at these different age periods. So from 6 to 12, Swami talked about, that's the age when the feelings really can be worked with. The idea is that you learn tools for working with your feelings during that era. So you get angry or upset. One of the things we just wrote up was a little activity called water off a duck's back, where you get upset feelings and you get so upset about it. The idea is that they don't last, and can you learn to shorten the cycle? So the teachers, when they work with this, this is younger kids, they have the opportunity to when they have a feeling and they start to get upset at something, if they can't want to, they can go over to, there's a duck and there's a little pitcher of water in the room, and you can pour the water over the duck's back and let go of the upset. And so it really wasn't that big of a deal. So learning to look at your feelings, step back a little bit. Is this a big deal? If it's a big deal, okay, maybe. But if it's not a big deal, if it's going to be gone in 2 hours, why not let go of it now? And so if you can learn that at 7, 8 years old, pretty important lesson.
Yeah, that's a huge life lesson that you're giving them at like that formative age. And then when does it shift? I know the will years Swami talked about become more prominent. That's more with the high school students.
Well, anybody who's ever been around teenagers knows that that's where the will comes out. They're all of a sudden they realize that, hey, I don't have to just sit around and listen to all these adults. I can go, can make out my own agendas and stuff. And so that's, it's a healthy stage. You're individualizing yourself from your parents. It creates, almost always it creates some tension. But if the parent understands what's happening, it can be a lot less. It gets less personal. It's just, oh no, my child's just becoming himself or herself. And so we try to, again, make them aware that that the willpower is one of your tools, and that give them opportunities to exercise it and strengthen it and apply it, and just see that also you can apply it in positive ways that uplift, ways that bring happiness and joy, or you can do it in negative ways where people get upset with you and you end up in a bad mood. But you can just it's a conscious tool that you can make use of, and one of the ways we do that is through we have these service adventures for the Will years also, where a lot of teenagers they get bored. They've been in the same situation for 12, 13 years. They've grown up in it. They kind of, from their perspective, they kind of think they know it inside out, and they start to show kind of a contractive energy. But it's all it is it's like a hothouse plant that's gotten too big for the hothouse, and you need to set it outside, and you need to let it get in the sun, the wind, go out there in the storms to some extent. So that's why we do these service adventures. We try to take them out to put them in situations that they're not comfortable in, go outside their comfort zone and see that, oh yeah, life is still, pretty challenging, and there's all this new stuff. So we've done all kinds of stuff. One of the first thing we did was we would take children down to Mexico from California, which is pretty close. And we found an orphanage to help out with. And it was life-changing just to watch our kids and their kids, the orphans kids, just start to interact, expand both ways. It was equally helpful. For the orphans, they'd been pretty neglected. Their place was pretty run down. Their food was very limited, very few donations, but partly because of our coming down, we went down every year for 3 or 4 years. People in the town started to take notice of the orphanage, and the mayor came over one time to meet us because here were these people from California, and they started to get donations, and all of a sudden they had started to have computers, and it was like it was wonderful, and also just the self-image of the kids to see that people actually thought they were worth visiting, and then our kids, it was just like, oh my gosh, these kids, they don't have cell phones. They don't have TVs, but look how happy they are. And so they just started to tune in, just a lot of the stuff that, that they could grow from. And so we've done a lot of those things throughout the years, just, again, stretching their will to function in other places that they're not used to. This makes a huge difference for teenagers. So now, and then at 18, to finish off the cycle, then you get to the intellect, where the intellect really comes into play for most. There's always a range. Some kids get in earlier, some kids get in later, but where they really start to make use of their minds to try to understand things in an intellectual way. It's unfortunately, it's the dominant tool that people in education think, all the way down to first grade. They think that the dominant tool is supposed to be the intellect. It's way out of phase. Creates tremendous pain for different people. I'm sure everybody has their own stories with that. One of my stories is, to this day, I'm 75 years old. I still cannot read Shakespeare. I know that Shakespeare was a wealth of wisdom. I know that Swami loved him to the point of writing songs. I can't even go through one page because I had to read Shakespeare in high school. And I thought it was the stupidest thing that I ever, why can't he just say it in plain English so you can understand what he's talking about? And I created this big, and I still, I haven't gotten over it yet. I'm still, someday maybe.
You didn't read King Lear in high school or something like that.
Yeah, so like, what in the world is this whole thing talking about? And, but then, a couple of years later, I remember when I was 19, I was a year behind. But my mind just started all of a sudden. It's like, wow, I want to read these things, not Shakespeare, but other things. And I want to understand. And then, the intellect kicks in. But that is a very hard thing.
How do you combat that, Nitai? Because the intellect is almost like up on a pedestal in the West. Like it's so entrenched in education and just the culture overall. I'm just wondering, is that a big obstacle for you when you're trying to help orient parents, let alone the students, with the education for life philosophy?
All the time, because the whole educational system is tilted, skewed toward the intellect. Almost every country, the highest level is these standardized tests. And if you you have to score high on these standardized tests to get into the right college, to get, all along these things. But it's just not, it's not a basic truth. It's a social construct that people got because they don't understand. They don't understand childhood. They don't understand these things that Swami mapped out with the different stages and how to cultivate them and stuff. So you just cram everything down to intellect. And again, you see so many people seriously handicapped in life because of their school experience, because they think they're stupid, because they couldn't learn to read as well as somebody else. Their math skills weren't up to everybody else's. That they might have all these other gifts that nobody ever took the time to appreciate. But so it's something that is a worldwide problem. More and more people are seeing the fallacy of it. It's been helped a lot from the top with a lot of the internet online companies, Google, Amazon, Apple, all these places. If you look at their employment practices, who do they look for in terms of hiring people? Well, they've learned that those test scores don't mean anything. And sometimes they're even a detraction, because if somebody studied all that time to get those high test scores, they didn't develop the rest of themselves. They're very narrow people. They don't know how to work with other people. They don't know how to be creative. They don't know some really basic working skills that are so valued. And that's a big, we actually, Aryavan, one of the guys that works with me in Education for Life, grew up in Silicon Valley. And so he shares that. He has a whole talk on that if you're trying to get a job with Google, develop all these other things that, develop your moral and spiritual values, develop all these things, and then you'll be more valuable to them. So even on that level.
So speaking of what you brought up at the beginning with Yogananda and the autobiography of a yogi chapter on Ranchi, developing those moral and spiritual principles, how does meditation play a part in Education for Life? Do you introduce that with even young students? Is it in the high school years, or do you not at all, or how does that work?
Yeah, you just bring it in. Again, you want to bring it in an experiential way, not in a dogmatic way. I've seen that abused with families and kids over the years, where people will force their child to meditate, and all it does is it creates a resistance that eventually kicks back. So you want to make it an experience that they enjoy. So one of the earliest things that some of the teachers have come up with, this is with preschoolers, so 3 and 4 year olds. They have something called quiet bodies. And for quiet bodies, you do it, a couple times a week. Everybody lies down on the carpet, and the teacher puts some soothing music on in the background, and then they do a little tensing and relaxing exercises. And then the child lies on their back, and the teacher comes around, they know this is going to happen, puts a pebble somewhere on their forehead or their chin or an arm or something. And the idea is, can you stay calm enough and still enough so it doesn't fall off? And so it becomes like a little game.
Yeah.
But in the experience of the game, you get really calm. You get very, and you start to appreciate, kids do appreciate, especially with being around their friends. The friends are usually a little frenetic at that age. And here, all of a sudden, you're with your friends and everybody's calm. I had a fun story with teenagers. So I had showed them about the basics of meditation, but I wanted to make it more, we would call it ego active, from another part of Education for Life, where you have some kind of a reward. So I just said, okay, we're going to try to keep our minds focused here at the point between the eyebrows. Every 30 seconds, I'm going to ring the bell, this little bell. And if when the bell rings, if your mind is here, you get to count a point and remember it. And at the end, you can keep score. So we were meditating 5 minutes, I think. So your top score is 10 minutes if your mind is here all the time. And so we did that for about a week. And then this one boy, we was getting ready to go again. Then he raises his hand and said, Nitai, could you not ring the bell? It's kind of distracting for me. I'm trying to... And I thought, good. I'm happy that we've got to that point. So anyway, there's a lot that you can do at all ages. There's other things besides formal meditation. Just having time alone in nature is a huge thing like that, or just anything that draws that energy inward. And you can, music, art, all kinds of experiences like that.
So it sounds like these guiding experiences for the child's own soul nature to come out. This is like a core
Exactly. Yeah.
thing of education for
That
life.
nature is already inside of them. Most times they don't have a chance to access it because nobody else prioritizes it. But if you're in you're in an education for life school, you can prioritize those things. You say, hey, this is a skill. Knowing that you have a place of inner peace inside of you, this is a life skill that's going to save you in so many situations as you go into life. Mm-hmm. And Swami talks about this. He says, we think of people being handicapped if they are missing an arm or they're blind or something like that. He says, there's much more profound handicaps from people who have all their physical parts working, but they don't have these other tools developed, these other parts of themselves developed. So they are truly handicapped in life. The life doesn't work for them. They get frustrated. So all of these things, that's part is preparing children to meet the challenges.
So speaking of that, I know that Swami talks in Education for Life a lot about maturity and what real maturity is. And in the world today where everything is so polarized, you could bring up some point and it can just be very reactive, like you're touching a live wire. So how does Education for Life, like that one teacher said to you, your children know themselves, how does Education for Life define maturity, and how does it help the students achieve it?
I think that's if I had to pick one point from all of Education for Life that I would say this is the key, was his definition of maturity. I've never had heard it before. I've never come across another definition like it. But he says, maturity is the ability to respond appropriately to realities other than your own. Mm. And I've meditated on that for decades and just worked with it to try to understand it more and more deeply. But it basically is about, it's a very simple way of describing expansion of consciousness, that when consciousness is in its infancy, this could be in an adult body, but it's very contracted. It's the only thing that it attends to are what its own needs are, maybe initially food or sleep. And that's the only thing that the mind is thinking about is, where's my next meal? Where am I going to sleep now? And there's no sense of awareness of anybody else's reality. Other people they just don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. Then as the consciousness grows, though, you start to become more aware and more of things around you. And at first, it's only in a very manipulative way. Look at that. There's people who have food over there. If I'm nice to them, they'll give me food. And so you incorporate their reality at a certain point, but it's still very much on this very we call it ego active contractive level. But the way that life works is we're drawn to keep reaching out because it's never enough. Even if we got that food from the other people, that's not enough. We keep wanting more and wanting more. And that more eventually comes to the point of realizing, oh, other people have needs. Other people, on a simple level, other people are hungry. What would it be like if I shared my food with somebody else? Or I shared my toys if I'm 3 years old in my preschool, or I just started taking their reality into my account. This is a huge thing with the teachers. They're always trying to help the children expand that. So the consciousness keeps expanding, and you get to the point where, you have your very high souls. You have your Martin Luther Kings and Gandhis and Mother Teresa's and all these people on the planet you can share with the children. These are people, they don't think about themselves anymore. They just think about the needs of other people, and these are the people that are the happiest. The ones that really feel that expansion and joy. And it's a wonderful way to introduce all that. So it's amazing. I'm still awed by it.
Yeah, that's profound, because what it sounds like, going back to what you were sharing with that one young child who said, I'm happy for no reason, and that was a whole other category that you explored. But that education for life is this whole system that's helping them expand their reality to get to that point where they can be truly happy without any reason.
Yeah.
Is that a correct understanding?
Yes. And it ties in again with, how do you share moral and spiritual values? You don't lecture people about you should be kind to people. You wait for an opportunity to let them experience kindness, and then you help them to introspect about, what did that feel like? How did you feel when you shared your toys, or shared your lunch, or shared whatever it was? And helping them realize that, oh, I felt better. And my motivation for doing it is, I want more of that. I want to feel that more and more, or with meditation. I felt really good when I was calm. So if I do more of it, then I'll feel even better. So it's based on experience. It's not based on precept or external, shoulds.
Yeah, and that's so prevalent though in the West. The shouldsy. I mean, like you, I grew up Catholic, and there's a lot of just the blame game, shame, guilt. I mean, I remember growing up and hearing it's a sin, and it was just like a common expression for, that's a shame. And it never even occurred to me that was, maybe not the best approach towards life. But this would be very liberating if you experience that at an early age.
Yes, again, yeah, and you have a basis. You have a basis from your own experience for expanding, rather than just because somebody said it was a good idea, or worse, which you and I heard, if you don't do it, there's eternal damnation waiting for you.
Yeah. I wonder, Nitai, how did you expand upon that yourself? I know that you wrote For Goodness Sake, but were there certain, because Swami's work with Education for Life was seminal, and you've dedicated your life to expanding and deepening your intuitive understanding. Did you take any certain approach with For Goodness Sake that was?
Yeah, well, two things. One, maybe not the highest one, but I was jealous. I was jealous of Joseph Cornell Barra because he had all these fun games that he had put together that people just related to so easily. Just like, oh, Bat and Moth, or Fortune, whatever. There's different ones that he had, and I always thought we should have games like that introduce moral and spiritual values. And so finally, my daughter, Mirabai, she left for college at 18. And all of a sudden, whoosh, I had all this space in my life that had been taken up before. And so I thought, okay, now's the time. So I sat down, because I do not enjoy writing. My life would have been easier if I had. But anyway, I did it. And with the help of crystal clarity. And basically the core of the book, and then there's a supplement things about how things for parents, things for teachers, but the core of the book is this collection of games. And the whole idea was, let's make moral and spiritual, when you say moral and spiritual values, probably you cringe a little bit. Like, oh, this is going to be painful. And we don't want that. We want, because of our upbringing, but we want the kids to think, oh, wow, that's fun. So to do that, I thought we could create some fun games. So there's these little games to introduce different qualities. This is the book, For Goodness Sake, and it has I think it has an index somewhere here. Yeah, here it is. It just lists a bunch of the main qualities. So it's got attention, cheerfulness, concentration, cooperation, courage, empathy, enthusiasm, friendship, etc. Mm-hmm. So there's, and for each one though, there's a little section that has activities where you can play these games with your kids, either classroom or in your home, and just kind of catch their attention. Like, oh, that was fun. And then you can, that's a little doorway. You say, well, we can go deeper with this and stuff. So for example, there's a game we do, it's called Fortunately, Unfortunately. And the kids just sit in a circle with the teacher, and you just create a story, a group story, where one person says, fortunately, today is a school holiday, and we are going to go out and play. And the next person has to continue the story, but unfortunately, said, unfortunately, it rained. And the next person has to go back to fortunately. Fortunately, there was a big inside place where we could go and have fun, and then you just go around the circle. And it just creates this up, down, up, down, up, down. And it's introducing this whole idea of even-mindedness, which would be a quality of, things do go up and down, but it doesn't mean that you have to, keep crashing, and you can there is a way to go through this where you don't have to go up and down. But basically, you introduce it in a fun way, so that you might have a story that goes along with it that you could bring in, or, your discussion or something. I actually want to share one other key here because it's so important.
Please, please.
So the basic goal, Swami tried to help me understand it, but I didn't really get it for about, 6 or 7 years. That learning is experiential. Real learning is experiential. It's not intellectual. So I was trying to help. This is before I wrote it, for goodness sake, and we were trying to learn the quality of cooperation, because I could just see they really needed to learn to cooperate. They were always, they weren't. And so this is an iconic story. I'm sure you personally have heard me say it several times, but since this is a video for people who maybe haven't heard it, I'll say it again. Yeah. Because it was another turning point for me, just like the Samadhi story. So I've been trying to help them learn cooperation. I've been talking about it. We've been discussing it. We've drawn pictures about it. We've read stories about it. We've everything I could think of, and not happening. You'd watch them, and they don't have a clue. They don't know what it is, and transferring it into their actual behavior. So this one day, it snows, and it doesn't snow very often where we live. So it's really exciting. So the kids all want to go outside and play in the snow. And I said, sure, okay, we can go out. So we go out. 5 minutes later, somebody smashes somebody with a snowball. Somebody gets upset. They're crying. Everybody's upset. Nobody's enjoying themselves. So I say, okay, come on, everybody back in. We come in, sit down. And they said, can we go back out? And I says, no, why? Why would you want to go back out? You're just going to kill each other. And so let's just sit still for a little bit. And then this thought came in my mind. Oh, wait a minute, this is an opportunity for cooperation. So I said to him, okay, everybody wants to go back out. If you each promise, take a pledge that you're going to cooperate, then we'll go out and see if it works. So we went around and we had this formal ceremony. So I firmly promised to cooperate with my classroom. Everybody had to say that. And so then we go outside, and people really want to be outside because it's snowing. So they're going up to each other and says, hello, can I give you a piece of some snow for you? Or can I carry this for you? It's very stilted. But they start to relax, and they got into it, and they just got into playing. But they still remembering this cooperation, because I was standing over there, and they knew that was the end of this, that they started to argue. And so we went on for 15, 20 minutes and had a great time. So, and I called them back in, and I said, okay, we just had 2 experiences. Which recess did you enjoy the most? And everybody's second recess was so fun. And why? What was different? What was different between the first recess and the second recess? Oh, cooperation. Ding! It went right. They knew it. They knew it from their own experience, and they carried that the rest of the school year. That class, I never had to worry about it the rest of the school year, because it was experiential. And I told that story to Swami, and he just started smiling. It's like finally had gotten it, this basic teaching that, yeah.
So it sounds like, Nitai, the role of an education for life teacher, that, and what your book helps with, is to guide the students to have these experiences of these moral and spiritual principles, so they can, it's not being told to them with the heavy finger, but it's coming from within. So how do you, because you've been at this for your entire adult life, how do you teach teachers? Your book would be a great resource, of course, that we'll recommend for really like any type of Montessori or Waldorf teacher. But how do you try to inspire this for people that want to be an education for life instructor?
Yeah. Well, there's there are the books, Education for Life. I highly recommend to people. I highly recommend to everybody, because I feel like it's much more than a book for teachers and parents. It's a book for just, again, how does life work, and how do you learn to maneuver through life? So I think it's one of Swami's most important books. But then, of course, for goodness sake, if you want some specific ideas for implementing things, and but then in the training programs, we go back to that idea of being able to honor the child from within. So we call it entering the child's world. So we give people practice. We give them some guidelines, and they actually ask them to practice. Just be with the child. Be with the child without an agenda. This is extremely hard for a lot of adults. How can I not have an agenda? This is scary. What is going to happen? But just to tune in, what's the child doing? And then see if there's a way that you can involve yourself in what the child's doing, and just learn to trust the child, that the children really do really neat things. And if you can slow down enough to, we'll have moms come into those classes and say, oh my gosh, I just realized I've never, ever let my child take the lead. I've always, every time I interact with them, I'm telling them what to do. It's time to go get ready for school. It's time to go shopping. It's time to go to bed. And it's always this, and this, just being able to be with them. And of course, the same thing works with adults, learning to be with adults, again, rather than just, telling them what to do. But so that's one of the main tools we try to develop with that. Another tool is we try to give them experiences in what does it mean to have moral and spiritual development. We come up with a set of cards, we call them the life skill action charts. And they're, again, on many of these same qualities, but they're activities, a collection of like 6 or 7 activities you can do to develop even-mindedness, or to develop courage, or to develop any of the other qualities. And you sit down with yourself to begin with, and you choose, what quality would I like to develop myself right now? But then you choose a couple or more of those activities that you're going to practice during the week. And there's a little check-off list, so you can make a little check when you've done it. And prove to yourself that you can make progress if you focus your mind and you actually do the things. So from that basis, then when you sit with the children, you can talk from experience that, yeah, we can make progress. Again, letting the children be involved in selecting where we want to grow. But again, just helps you, with having ready-made ideas and what you could do. Eventually people get to develop their own ideas, but it's a nice beginning tool. So that, and then it's also really important that people learn what it means to meditate, because again, how do you help a child develop their inner self if you don't know your own inner self? So you have to, that's part of the training. We also asked them to read another of the Clarity books, Out of the Labyrinth. Swami told me several times over the years is get the teachers to read Out of the Labyrinth. And
why did he feel that was important?
It is his seminal book. If you read Out of the Labyrinth, you see that there are ideas in there that just continues through most of the rest of his books that he writes. This is the one that took 10 years for him to write because he was having to go so deep inside himself and the Western dogmatism culture. But he introduces a topic there. He calls it natural law. And it takes this whole idea of moral and spiritual development to a whole nother level. Because he basically, in chapter by chapter, he shows you this is the blueprint for the universe. The whole of everything that's in creation basically is a multifaceted, interwoven dynamic that promotes the expansion of consciousness. And then this is why I think he was so patient with me starting, not feeling like he had this, he's looking over my shoulder all the time to make sure I was doing the right thing. That if my intention was in this direction and I was open, life was already trying to teach me, and I would become aware of what was already trying to happen. So like that thing with the snow incident I shared earlier in this talk, he knew that life would present experiences like that, but I needed to be awake enough to take advantage of them. So, so this whole idea of trusting natural law, or you could, if you're more devotional, trusting Divine Mother, that there is this support for growth that is embedded in life. And if we can learn to see life from that perspective, we can relax, we can take advantage of it, we can expect that life will step in to provide essential things that we need for if we're trying to move in that direction. It's a profound lesson of trusting life, trusting the divine plan, and
education for life is helping hasten that expansion of consciousness for the students and trusting. So you really have, from what I'm hearing and feeling from you today, that you yourself, from your own experience, have deep trust in that process, if you will, of unfoldment.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a lifelong process, of course. We are learning to trust on deeper and deeper levels. But that everything that comes to you, this is a story that Jyotish told once. This very renowned Indian teacher was coming to give a large public talk. And there are, thousands of people in the audience because he's so well known. And he comes out, he's a little bit late, he comes out, and he says, everything that happens is an opportunity for spiritual growth. And he walks off stage. And the whole audience is just sitting there. Whoa, that was a short lecture. And he comes back about 10 more minutes later and says, everything that happens to you is an opportunity for spiritual growth. And he walks off again. He did it 3 or 4 times. And that was it. That was this message. And, it's such a simple statement, but it takes a lifetime to be able to really get the essence of it.
What would you say to a mother, let's say a single mother that's, gone through the pandemic the last couple of years, that's experienced and is trying to make ends meet, and how do they get to that consciousness that everything is an opportunity, versus the complaining Jane, if you will, attitude?
Yes. Well, again, you have to do it in bite-sized mouthfuls, but even coming to a situation like that, well, what could possibly be a positive thing for me? I've seen this scenario many times over the years. There will be a young woman, she's a single mom, and very sweet nature, very sweet person, very kind of just humble, and they have a son. And this son is rowdy. He's so full of energy, and he's bouncing off the wall, a little bit like my grandson. And it's like, oh my God, how do I do this? But you see, obviously, the mom from the outside, the mom needs to develop her willpower. And this opportunity of having this child is demanding that because there's no way there's nobody else to go to. She's a single mom. So it's this pressure cooker, which can drive you nuts also, but it is the natural law that at this point in your evolution, your spiritual evolution, you really need to develop your willpower. You've got these other qualities down really well. You're really kind, you're really generous, you're all these other things. You got to get this willpower up. So I'm sending you this child, and there we go. We're off to the races. So at least asking the question, that's the first step. What could be positive? What could be positive about the pandemic? You know, you pick it up from that string, it's a whole different ball game than if you're just sitting there, oh my God, this horrible thing is happening. I can't do what I used to do. Yeah. And but you can do other things. I mean, we have this online high school that is a byproduct of the pandemic, that I was kind of prejudiced against online education because the only online education I knew of was you sit down, you watch a lecture, you watch a video, and you take notes, and it's dead education. But the seeing what can happen where I'm just blown away by these students saying things like, these are my best friends. These people, these little boxes of people I talk to every day. and just also just seeing that, you know, the fact that you can talk to kids from completely other cultures, but you have this whole body of experience you can share and you can grow from. And it's just so expansive. So I'm sold on this approach now, which was again because of the pandemic. So,
and it's been a part of that expansion of consciousness that you were talking about. I believe it was in Autobiography where Yogananda said, "Center divine vision is center everywhere, circumference nowhere." And I've been thinking about that a lot with the pandemic, with of course Zoom, and now we have all these little boxes like you were saying. It's like, wow, we're seeing our center everywhere, or God reflected everywhere. Do you bring up God at all in Education for Life, or again it's more the guiding of the experience so they can feel that touch of the divine within without having to say it heavy-handedly?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm have the completely right answer. I'm personally, because of my upbringing, I'm hesitant. I mean, it took me 2 years being a member of Ananda before I would use the word God. It's just, and everybody's using this word, and I'm going, because my experience of it was so uninspiring when I was up until the age of 23. So I think I might bend over backwards a little bit more of just, let's just not label it. Let's just have experience of joy, peace, expansion, all these different things. And then, you know, what we have a course in the high school called the History of World Religions, where we go through and talk about, which I'm really comfortable with, because you'd love to talk, well, this is how the Buddhists look at it. This is how they label these same experiences. This is how the Muslims do it, or the Christians. And, you know, the word God, it's an Anglo-Saxon word anyway. So even that has its limitations, and you can at least learn 10 other names for God from different cultures. It kind of, it helps me balance it out from those past memories that I have. Just okay, because it just, yeah, the experiencing again is so important. Build it on their experience, and then don't worry too much about the labels.
Right, the labels are secondary. Right, the words are like the shell to the spirit. I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Is there anything, Nitai, any question I didn't ask today that you wished I would have asked?
No, I think you did a great job. I think it feels like we have a nice, sharing, and hopefully it'll be helpful to people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the world is in desperate need of this type of approach towards education, it being experiential, and just want to express on behalf of all the parents out there and just everyone, just how grateful we are that you've dedicated yourself to this approach towards education, because it's so refreshing, it's so inspiring, and it's so practical, because it works. Yeah. And thank you for what you're doing, and we look forward to we'll have more conversations like this in the future.
Okay. Great, Narayan. Thanks for making this possible.
Thank you, Nitai.